In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where a trillion species vie for power and dominance, one human mechanic from Earth was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't war, politics, or ancient cosmic horrors, it's being chosen by someone who could destroy entire star systems with a thought, yet only wants to hold your hand. Marcus Chen never imagined that fixing a broken hyperdrive would lead to the most powerful being in known space declaring him her destined mate. Now, with armies hunting him, empires falling, and reality itself bending around an alien princess whose love could either save humanity or doom it forever, Marcus must navigate a universe where his greatest strength isn't his engineering skills, it's his stubborn human refusal to be anything other than exactly who he is. This is the story of how one ordinary human became the most sought-after person in the galaxy, not because of what he could do, but because of who he chose to be. Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades, squinting at the massive hyperdrive core that hummed with barely contained energy. The Nexus station's maintenance bay stretched around him like a cathedral of metal and plasma conduits, filled with the constant background noise of 1,000 different species conducting business in the galaxy's largest trading hub. He'd been working here for 3 years now, ever since humanity had finally been granted trading rights in the Galactic Commerce Union, and he'd learned to tune out the chaos. What he couldn't tune out was the ship that had just docked in Bay 94. It wasn't the size that caught his attention, though the vessel was easily twice as large as anything else currently berthed. It wasn't even the impossible black metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was the silence that followed in its wake. The constant chatter of the station's communication channels had gone dead. The usual haggling and arguing from the trading floors had stopped. Even the automated announcements had ceased. Marcus set down his plasma torch and walked to the observation window. The ship's design was unlike anything in his 3 years of galactic maintenance work. Where most vessels showed the practical aesthetics of their builders, the geometric precision of Altarian craft, the organic curves of Zephyrian bioships, the brutal functionality of Terran engineering, this ship seemed to exist outside such categories. Its hull flowed like liquid metal frozen in motion, with no visible seams or entry ports. "Hey Marcus," called out Krell, his Vorthan supervisor, his forearms still working on a freight hauler's engine while his eye stalks turned toward the window. "You see that thing? Been sitting there for 20 minutes now. No communication, no docking requests, no cargo manifest. Just sitting." Marcus nodded, but something was bothering him. The ship's energy signature was all wrong. His enhanced human intuition, what the other species often dismissed as mere pattern recognition, was screaming warnings. The power readings should have been off the charts for a ship that size, but his instruments showed almost nothing. Either their sensors were malfunctioning, or that ship was running on technology so advanced it barely registered on conventional equipment. A soft chime echoed through the maintenance bay, followed by a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The translation matrix built into every station facility kicked in, but Marcus noticed it was struggling. The words came through in perfect standard galactic, but there was an underlying harmonic that made his teeth ache. "Greetings, Nexus Station. I request immediate maintenance services. Bay 94 requires a technician. Specifically, the human technician currently observing from Bay 12. Every head in the maintenance area turned toward Marcus. Krell's eye stalks twisted in what Marcus had learned was the Vorthan equivalent of shocked confusion. "How does it know you're human?" Krell whispered. "How does it even know you're here?" Marcus was wondering the same thing. Humans were still relatively new to galactic society, and, while they'd gained a reputation as surprisingly adaptable engineers, they were hardly well known enough for random ships to request them specifically. Station Control's voice crackled through the comm system, heavy with the kind of nervousness that meant someone very important was involved. "Bay 12, report to Bay 94 immediately. Priority override. All other maintenance operations are suspended until further notice." Marcus grabbed his toolkit and headed for the transport tube, ignoring the worried chatter of his colleagues. The ride to Bay 94 took 3 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the doors slid open, he stepped into a scene that defied everything he knew about first contact protocols. The ship's hull had simply opened. Not like an airlock or cargo door, but as if the metal had become liquid and formed an entrance. The opening was perfectly sized for a human, which should have been impossible unless the ship had scanned him beforehand. Beyond the entrance, soft light beckoned. Station security was nowhere to be seen, which was unprecedented for an unknown vessel. Marcus activated his comm unit. "Control, this is Chen. Where's security? And why am I the only one here?" Static answered him. His comm was dead, but that should have been impossible this close to the station's central hub. Marcus looked around the empty bay and made a decision that would change his life forever. He stepped through the opening. The interior of the ship was a revelation. The walls seemed to be made of the same liquid metal as the exterior, but they glowed with an inner light that was warm and welcoming. The corridor curved gently ahead, and Marcus found himself walking forward without conscious decision. It wasn't compulsion, exactly, but rather a feeling that this was where he needed to be. He emerged into a circular chamber that took his breath away. The room was vast, far larger than the ship's exterior dimensions should have allowed. The walls were transparent, offering a view of stars that slowly wheeled around them. But these weren't the stars visible from Nexus Station. This was someplace else entirely. "Welcome aboard, Marcus Chen." He spun around to find the source of the voice and felt his heart skip a beat. She was humanoid, but only in the most basic sense. Tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shift between deep blue and violet depending on the angle of the light. Her hair was silver white and moved as if suspended in water, and her eyes were the color of distant galaxies, filled with swirling points of light. But it wasn't her alien beauty that stopped him cold. It was the way she was looking at him, with an expression he'd seen before on human faces but never expected to see directed at him from someone who could probably level planets. It was hope, wonder, and something that looked disturbingly like love. "I am Princess Zyrthala of the Eternal Empire," she said, and her voice was like music played on instruments that didn't exist. "Though I suspect that means little to you. Your people are refreshingly unconcerned with the politics of ancient powers." Marcus set down his toolkit, trying to process what he was seeing. The Eternal Empire was a legend, a story told by the oldest species about a civilization so advanced they had transcended physical existence eons ago. They weren't supposed to be real, and they definitely weren't supposed to be interested in human maintenance techs. "Princess," he said carefully, "I'm honored, but I think there's been some mistake. I'm just a mechanic. If you need diplomatic contact with humanity, the Commerce Union has proper channels for that." Zyrthala stepped closer, and Marcus noticed that she didn't quite walk so much as glide across the floor. When she moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around her, like heat shimmer in reverse. "There is no mistake, Marcus Chen. I have searched the galaxy for cycles beyond counting, visiting every species, every world, every consciousness that has achieved sentience. I have observed the rise and fall of civilizations, witnessed the birth and death of stars, and found nothing but emptiness." She paused, and when she looked at him again, there was vulnerability in those cosmic eyes that made his chest tight. "Until I observed your people. Until I observed you." Marcus took a step back, bumping into his toolkit. "Ma'am, I appreciate the attention, but I think you've got the wrong idea about humans. We're not that special. We're newcomers to all this galactic civilization stuff. Half our technology is borrowed from other species." "You misunderstand," Zyrthala said, and there was amusement in her voice now. "I am not interested in your technology. I am interested in you. Specifically, irreplaceably, you." The chamber around them shifted, and suddenly, Marcus was looking at a holographic display that showed himself working in the maintenance bay, fixing a Drelian cruiser's life support system while the crew watched nervously. But the image was from 6 months ago, long before he'd noticed any mysterious ships watching the station. "You spent 14 hours repairing that vessel," Zyrthala said softly. "The Drelian crew had children aboard. Their captain had already accepted that they would have to abandon ship and hope for rescue. But you wouldn't give up. You bypassed 17 failed systems, rebuilt their air recyclers from spare parts, and refused payment because, in your words, kids shouldn't have to worry about breathing." Another image appeared. Marcus helping evacuate a disabled transport during a solar storm, staying behind to manually operate an airlock until everyone else was safe. Then, another, him sharing his ration pack with a starving Kepler refugee, claiming he wasn't hungry. I have watched you for cycles, Marcus-chan. I have seen your kindness, your stubborn refusal to give up, your way of treating every being with dignity regardless of their species or status. I have seen you choose to help when it costs you, choose to care when it would be easier not to, choose hope when logic suggests despair. Marcus stared at the images, uncomfortable with seeing his own actions displayed like this. Those are just normal things. Anyone would have done the same. No, Zyarthala said, and her voice carried the weight of cosmic certainty. They would not. I have observed 1 trillion souls across the galaxy, Marcus-chan. I have seen species so advanced they reshape reality with their thoughts, being so powerful they consume stars for breakfast. And, in all that vast intelligence and capability, I have found selfishness, cruelty, indifference, and despair. The images faded, leaving them alone in the star-filled chamber. Zyarthala moved closer, and Marcus could feel the impossible energy that surrounded her, like standing next to a barely contained supernova. But, in you, in your people, I have found something I thought was extinct in this universe. Compassion without expectation of reward. Courage without the power to ensure victory. Hope without guarantee of success. You choose to be good not because you are strong enough to impose your will, but because goodness is what you choose to be. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but she held up a hand that sparkled with contained starlight. I have decided, Marcus-chan. After eons of searching, I have found what I was looking for. I choose you as my consort, my partner, my equal in all things. Together, we will reshape this galaxy into something worthy of the kindness I have seen in your heart. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He sat down heavily on his toolkit, trying to process what he just heard. A being of unimaginable power, a princess of an empire that existed in legend, wanted to, what? Date him? Princess, he said slowly, I'm flattered. Really? But, you can't just decide something like that. That's not how relationships work. Zyarthala tilted her head in what might have been confusion. How do they work? And that, Marcus realized, was when his quiet life as a maintenance tech officially ended. Because when a cosmic princess who could rewrite reality with a thought asked you to explain human relationships, you were already in deeper trouble than any hyperdrive malfunction could create. Well, he said, settling in for what was clearly going to be a very long conversation, it starts with getting to know each other. Around them, the ship hummed with alien music, and, somewhere in the distance, the first warning alarms of a galaxy about to change forever began to sound. 3 days had passed since Marcus's world turned upside down, and he was beginning to understand that he had vastly underestimated how complicated his life was about to become. Currently, he was sitting in what Zyarthala called her contemplation chamber, which looked like the inside of a nebula, trying to explain the concept of dating while she listened with the intense focus of someone studying quantum mechanics. So you engage in these casual encounters to determine compatibility before making permanent commitments, she asked, her galaxy-colored eyes reflecting genuine curiosity. It's not that clinical, Marcus said, grateful that the floating chairs she'd provided were more comfortable than they looked. It's about spending time together, learning about each other's interests, seeing if you enjoy each other's company. You know, like, what do you do for fun? Zyarthala considered this. I maintain the structural integrity of spacetime in 17 star systems, compose symphonies that exist only in gravitational waves, and occasionally restructure matter at the subatomic level for artistic expression. Marcus blinked. Okay, that's impressive. But, what about smaller stuff? What makes you laugh? Laugh? You know, when something amuses you and you make that noise humans make when they're happy? She demonstrated the concept by apparently accessing his memories through some impossible telepathic connection, which was both helpful and deeply unsettling. Ah, yes. I have observed this response. I find it curious that your species has evolved a specific vocalization for amusement. Most species don't laugh? The Kythera express amusement by changing the color of their secondary brain crest. The veiled dancers of Sirius B create temporary pocket dimensions. The ancient architects of a soft chime interrupted her explanation, and the chamber's walls shifted to show what Marcus assumed was some kind of communication display. The hologram that appeared made him forget all about alien humor. Standing in the projection was a being that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a battleship. Its chitinous armor gleamed with battle scars, and its four eyes burned with an intelligence that was clearly both ancient and hostile. When it spoke, even the translation matrix seemed afraid. Princess Zyarthala of the Eternal Empire. I am War Prime Kexthor of the Crimson Hegemony. Your presence in civilized space has been noted and disapproved of. Return to whatever dimensional exile your kind has accepted, or face the consequences. Marcus looked between the projection and Zyarthala, expecting to see fear or at least concern. Instead, she looked mildly irritated, like someone had interrupted her favorite song. War Prime Kexthor, she replied, her voice taking on harmonics that made the ship's hull vibrate. Your concern is noted and dismissed. I am here on personal business. I suggest you attend to your own affairs. The insectoid being's mandibles clicked ominously. Your personal business threatens the stability of 17 sectors. Already, species that have never cooperated are forming alliances against the return of the Eternal Empire. Do you think we have forgotten what your kind did to the galaxy before your self-imposed exile? Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. Zyarthala, what is he talking about? She turned to him with an expression that might have been embarrassment if cosmic entities were capable of such mundane emotions. It is complicated, Marcus. My people did not leave this galaxy entirely by choice. War Prime Kexthor's projection leaned forward aggressively. She has not told you? Princess, your honesty with your chosen pet is as lacking as your people's wisdom. Tell him about the War of Unbeing. Tell him about the trillion souls your empire consumed in its quest for transcendence. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Princess? Zyarthala raised her hand, and War Prime Kexthor's projection froze in place like a paused recording. The War Prime speaks of events that occurred 3 million years ago, Marcus. My people were different then. Younger. Less wise. Different how? She gestured, and the chamber around them shifted to display a historical record that made Marcus's mind reel. Massive ship entities that devoured stars for fuel. Planets being disassembled and rebuilt as arc projects. Entire species being uplifted or modified according to alien aesthetics. And, at the center of it all, beings that look like Zyarthala directing the cosmic chaos with casual indifference. We believed that consciousness was the only true beauty in the universe, she said softly. We sought to preserve it, enhance it, perfect it. We did not understand that consciousness requires choice, requires the possibility of suffering, requires the freedom to be imperfect. The images showed the aftermath, a galaxy in rebellion, species uniting against their would-be gods, a war that lasted for millennia and ended with the Eternal Empire withdrawing to dimensions beyond normal space. We learned, Zyarthala continued. We grew. We accepted exile as the price of our arrogance and spent eons in contemplation and growth. But the galaxy has not forgotten, and it fears our return. Marcus stood up, pacing to the chamber's edge where stars wheeled in impossible patterns. So when you chose me as your, whatever this is, you started a war. The galaxy was already preparing for war, she corrected. My people's exile was always intended to be temporary. The question was never whether we would return, but when. And what we would be when we did. War Prime Kexthor's projection unfroze with a sound like grinding metal. Your pet has heard truth at last, Princess. Will he still choose to stand beside a genocidal god queen when the fleets of 1,000 worlds come for his head? Marcus turned to face the projection, and something in his expression made both the War Prime and Zyarthala go very still. First of all, he said, his voice carrying the kind of calm that came before human stubbornness reached critical mass, I'm not anyone's pet. Second, threatening someone is a really poor way to start a diplomatic conversation. And, third, if you think humanity is going to be intimidated by ancient history and posturing, you clearly haven't done your research. War Prime Kexthor's mandibles clicked in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as alien laughter. Bold words from a species that has barely achieved interstellar travel. Do you know what will happen when I inform the galaxy that the Eternal Empire's princess has chosen a human as her consort? Every species will assume your people are collaborating with their ancient oppressors. Humanity will be marked for extinction. Then, you'd be making a mistake, Marcus said. Because you'd be assuming that humanity needs your approval to exist. We don't. The War Prime leaned closer to the projection pickup. You speak of defiance, human. But, can your species survive orbital bombardment? Can your homeworld withstand the combined fleets of the Hegemony, the Altarian Collective, and the Vorthan Trade Federation? Marcus smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Zyarthala's eyes widen. War Prime, let me tell you something about humans that you might not have learned from your intelligence reports. We're really good at surviving things that should kill us. We're even better at making friends with people who are supposed to be our enemies. And, we're absolutely exceptional at finding ways to turn disasters into opportunities. He walked closer to the projection, and his voice took on the kind of certainty that had once convinced a dying ship's computer to keep running on spare parts and hope. But, here's what you need to understand, I haven't agreed to anything yet. Princess Zyarthala made her choice, but I get to make mine. And, I don't make decisions based on threats. The chamber fell silent except for the subtle harmonics of the ship's impossible engines. War Prime Kexthor studied Marcus for a long moment. You interest me, human. Very well. I will give you 7 standard days to consider your position. After that, the galaxy will respond to the Eternal Empire's return with or without your cooperation. The projection vanished, leaving Marcus alone with a cosmic princess who was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. That was unwise, she said quietly. Kexthor is not known for patience or mercy. Maybe, Marcus admitted. But, I meant what I said. I don't respond well to threats, and I don't make life decisions under pressure. He turned to face her fully. Which brings us back to the conversation we were having. You want me to be your consort. I'm willing to consider it. But, that means we do this properly. Properly? We date. We get to know each other. You learn about human customs, I learn about cosmic princess customs. We figure out if we actually like each other as people, not just as symbols or ideals. Zyarthala tilted her head. And, if the galaxy goes to war while we are dating? Marcus grinned, and, for the first time since this adventure began, he felt like himself again. Princess, if there's one thing humans are good at, it's multitasking. We can save the galaxy and figure out our relationship status at the same time. She stared at him for a moment, then did something that surprised him. She laughed. The sound was like silver bells mixed with stellar wind, and it made the ship's walls shimmer with reflected light. Very well, Marcus-chan. Teach me about dating. But, I should warn you, I have never attempted anything like this before. That's okay, Marcus said, settling back into his floating chair. Neither have I. Not with someone who can restructure matter with their thoughts, anyway. Where do we begin? Marcus considered this. Well, usually, you start by talking about your interests, your hopes, your fears. The normal stuff. My interests include maintaining dimensional stability across multiple realities. My hopes involve preventing the heat death of the universe. My fears. She paused, and, for a moment, she looked almost human. My fears involve spending eternity alone. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not the cosmic energy that surrounded her, but something more fundamental. Yeah, he said quietly. I can relate to that one. Outside the chamber's transparent walls, the stars continued their ancient dance, but, for the first time in eons, they seemed to be dancing to a different tune. And, somewhere in the vast emptiness between galaxies, ancient powers began to stir, drawn by the impossible possibility that love might be stronger than the laws that governed the universe. The galaxy had 7 days to prepare for war. Marcus Chen had 7 days to decide whether he was brave enough to fall in love with someone who could rewrite reality. As first dates went, he definitely had less complicated ones. The Nexus Station's central promenade had seen its share of unusual sights over the centuries, but, even by galactic standards, the scene currently unfolding was drawing stares. Marcus Chen, human maintenance tech, was walking through the crowded marketplace with Princess Zyarthala of the Eternal Empire, who had agreed to his suggestion that they try a normal date in public. The challenge was that Zyarthala's idea of blending in involved projecting a humanoid appearance that was almost, but not quite, entirely convincing. She looked human at first glance, but her eyes still held galaxies, her hair moved like it was underwater, and she had a tendency to unconsciously levitate small objects when she was thinking. "This is fascinating," she said, watching a Kepler merchant hawking exotic fruits that changed color based on the buyer's emotional state. "Your people conduct commerce through direct negotiation rather than telepathic consensus?" "Most species do," Marcus said, gently guiding her around a group of Drelian tourists who were taking pictures of everything with enthusiasm that bordered on mania. "Not everyone has telepathic abilities. But, how do you determine fair value without accessing each other's true desires and needs?" Marcus paused at a vendor selling Terran coffee, one of humanity's few successful exports to the wider galaxy. "We argue, mostly. Sometimes we lie a little. It's all part of the process." The Altarian vendor, whose crystalline structure reflected the promenade's lights in prismatic patterns, recognized Marcus immediately. "Marcus! Good to see you, friend. The usual? 2 coffees, Veltar. 1 with extra sugar." As Veltar prepared their drinks, Marcus noticed Zyarthala studying the interaction with scientific intensity. "You know this being personally?" "Veltar's ship comes through for maintenance every few months. We've gotten to know each other." Marcus accepted the steaming cups, the familiar aroma bringing a sense of normalcy to what was definitely not a normal day. "But, this one is not human. Why do you consider it a friend?" Marcus stopped walking, turning to look at her fully. "Zyarthala, do you only care about people who are exactly like you?" She paused, clearly thinking about the question more deeply than he'd expected. "I have never had friends, Marcus. Only subjects, servants, and equals among my people. The concept is foreign to me." They found an empty bench near the promenade's observation deck, where the view showed the swirling nebula that gave Nexus Station its tourist appeal. Marcus handed her the coffee and watched her examine it like it might contain the secrets of the universe. "Try it," he said. "But, be careful, it's hot." She sipped delicately, and her expression shifted through several permutations of surprise. "This is pleasant. The chemical compounds produce a mild stimulant effect, but the flavor." She took another sip. "There are layers of complexity here. How do you achieve this with such primitive preparation methods?" "Primitive?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That coffee maker cost me 3 months' salary. I could restructure the molecular bonds to create a more efficient extraction process. Please don't." Marcus held up a hand. "The whole point is that it's not perfect. The little variations, the slightly different taste each time, that's what makes it interesting." Zyarthala stared at him over her coffee cup. "You prefer imperfection?" "I prefer authenticity, I guess. Things that are too perfect don't feel real." A commotion from the other end of the promenade caught their attention. A group of beings Marcus didn't recognize were moving through the crowd with purposeful intensity, scanning faces and asking questions. Their technology looked advanced even by galactic standards, and they were heading in their general direction. "Friends of yours?" Marcus asked. Zyarthala's expression darkened. "Shelf hunters. Mercenaries in service to the Crimson Hegemony. It seems Warprime Kexthor has decided not to wait the full 7 days." The lead hunter, a tall humanoid with skin like polished obsidian and too many joints in its limbs, spotted them and pointed with a gesture that involved several arms. The group began moving faster. "We should leave," Zyarthala said, beginning to stand. Marcus pulled her back down. "Wait. Let me try something first." "Marcus, these beings are capable of tracking energy signatures across dimensional barriers. They will not be deterred by, trust me." The hunters approached with the confident stride of predators who had cornered their prey. The leader spoke in a voice like grinding stone, its words automatically translated by the station systems. "Human designated Marcus Chen. By order of Warprime Kexthor, you will accompany us for questioning regarding your association with hostile entities." Marcus took another sip of his coffee, the picture of casual relaxation. "I'm sorry, but I'm on a date right now. Could you come back later?" The hunter's head tilted in what might have been confusion. You refuse lawful detention? I'm not refusing anything. I'm asking you to be polite about it. Marcus gestured to Zyarthala, who was watching the exchange with fascination. This is Zara. We're having our first official date, and it's kind of a big deal for both of us. So if you could maybe schedule your whole hostile questioning thing for, say, tomorrow morning? I promise I'm not going anywhere. The hunters exchanged glances, clearly not prepared for this response. Their leader tried again. Human Shen, you do not understand the severity of your situation. The being beside you is really important to me, Marcus interrupted. Look, I get it. You guys have a job to do. I respect that. But, so do I, and, right now my job is figuring out whether Zara and I are compatible long-term partners. That's actually a lot more complicated than your job, when you think about it. Zyarthala leaned over and whispered, Marcus, they have weapons capable of disintegrating matter at the quantum level. I heard, he whispered back. But, they also have bureaucracy. Watch. He turned back to the hunters. Here's what I propose. You go back to your boss and tell him that Marcus Chen received his message and will be happy to discuss the situation. But, you also tell him that humans don't negotiate under duress. If he wants cooperation, he needs to ask nicely. The lead hunter was clearly struggling with the concept of a prey animal that refused to act afraid. And, if War Prime Kextor declines your proposal? Marcus shrugged. Then, he'll learn something interesting about human stubbornness. And, you'll learn something interesting about why picking fights with people who have nothing left to lose is usually a bad idea. For a long moment, the only sounds were the background hum of the station and Zyarthala's coffee cup rattling slightly against its saucer as she tried not to laugh. Finally, the lead hunter spoke into a communication device in its native language, too fast for the translation matrix to follow. After a brief exchange, it looked back at Marcus. War Prime Kextor wishes to know how long this date will require. Marcus checked his chronometer. We've got dinner reservations at 1900 hours, and I was hoping to catch the meteor shower from Observation Deck 7 around 2200. So, probably until tomorrow morning? Assuming things go well, of course. The hunter stared at him for another long moment, then spoke into its communicator again. This time, Marcus could swear he heard something like exasperated laughter from the other end. You have until dawn station time, Human Shen. After that, War Prime Kextor's patience will be exhausted. Understood. Thank you for being reasonable about this. The hunters withdrew, moving back through the crowd with considerably less confidence than they'd shown on arrival. Marcus waited until they were out of sight before allowing himself to slump slightly. That was either very brave or very stupid, Zyarthala observed. Probably both. But, it worked, didn't it? She was quiet for a moment, studying his face with those impossible eyes. Marcus, why did you not simply allow me to remove the threat? I could have displaced them to a pocket dimension for the duration of our evening. Because that would have proved Kextor's point. That you solve problems with power, and I'm just along for the ride. And, instead? Marcus stood, offering her his arm in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and completely natural. Instead, we showed them that humans solve problems by being unreasonably reasonable. And that you're willing to let me handle things my way, even when you could handle them faster. Zyarthala took his arm, and Marcus felt the subtle vibration of barely contained cosmic energy. Your way is inefficient. Yeah, but it's honest. And it means that when we do solve the problem, everyone involved will understand why it was solved and how to avoid it in the future. They began walking toward the restaurant level, passing shops and vendors from dozens of worlds. Around them, the normal chaos of galactic commerce continued, but Marcus noticed that people seemed more relaxed somehow, as if the tension from the hunter's presence had lifted. Marcus, Zyarthala said quietly, what if your approach does not work? What if Kextor decides that patience is weakness? Marcus squeezed her arm gently. Then, we'll figure something else out. Together. Even if it means war? Especially if it means war. Zyarthala, I've spent 3 years working on this station. I've met beings from hundreds of worlds, helped fix their ships, shared meals with their crews, listened to their stories. Most of them just want to live their lives, raise their families, maybe see something beautiful once in a while. They're not looking for war. They stopped at the restaurant, a small place that specialized in fusion cuisine from across the galaxy. The Terran hostess, a young woman who had arrived on the same transport as Marcus 3 years ago, greeted them with professional enthusiasm that turned to surprise when she recognized him. Marcus? Wow, you clean up nice. Table for two? Please, Sarah. Somewhere with a view, if you have it. As they were led to their table, Zyarthala leaned close. You are known here as well. I get around. Sarah's from New Tokyo, same continent I grew up on. We've had coffee a few times, talked about missing Earth food. Their table overlooked the station's central core, where ships of every conceivable design moved in carefully choreographed patterns. The view was beautiful, but Marcus found himself more interested in watching Zyarthala examine the menu with scientific precision. This is remarkably complex, she observed. 17 different species cuisine, adapted for a dozen different biochemistries. The owner's a genius. Kim Patel, from Mumbai originally. She figured out how to make Drelian enzyme paste taste like chocolate. Revolutionary stuff. You speak of these beings with such casual warmth. Marcus looked around the restaurant, noting the dozens of species represented among the diners. They're not beings, Zyarthala. They're people. Kim laughs at terrible jokes and worries about her daughter's grades. Sarah sends half her salary back to Earth to help her parents. Veltar collects ancient music from dead civilizations and plays it when he thinks no one's listening. And, you know all of this how? I pay attention. I ask questions. I listen when people talk. He met her galaxy-filled gaze. That's how relationships work. Not just romantic ones, but all of them. You learn who someone really is, underneath all the important titles and cosmic powers. Zyarthala was quiet for a long time, watching the flow of traffic through the station's heart. Finally, she spoke. I have existed for longer than some stars have burned, Marcus Chen. I have shaped realities and commanded forces that could unmake galaxies. But I have never paid attention in the way you describe. Then, we're both learning something new. Their server approached, another human who recognized Marcus and greeted him with the easy familiarity of long acquaintance. As they ordered their meal, Marcus felt something settle into place, a sense of rightness that had nothing to do with cosmic destiny and everything to do with the simple pleasure of sharing dinner with someone interesting. Outside, the galaxy held its breath, waiting for war or peace. But, in a small restaurant overlooking the heart of civilization, a human mechanic and a cosmic princess were discovering that the most revolutionary force in the universe might be as simple as two people learning to see each other clearly. The evening was just beginning. Marcus woke up to the sound of alarms and the feeling that his life had just become exponentially more complicated. The guest quarters aboard Zyarthala's ship were more luxurious than anything he'd experienced, but the red warning lights flashing through the walls suggested that comfort was about to become irrelevant. He'd spent the evening learning that dating a cosmic princess involved conversations about the fundamental nature of reality over dessert, followed by watching a meteor shower from a perspective outside normal spacetime. It had been, without question, the most extraordinary first date in human history. It had also been surprisingly normal, in ways that mattered more than the impossible setting. Now, as he pulled on his clothes and headed for the ship's command center, Marcus suspected that the normal part was over. He found Zyarthala standing before a holographic display that showed the space around Nexus Station filled with warships. The vessels represented at least a dozen different species, their designs ranging from the sleek predatory lines of hegemony dreadnoughts to the crystalline complexity of Altarian battlesingers. At the center of the formation, Warprime Kexthor's flagship dominated the view like a metal mountain bristling with weapons. How many? Marcus asked, accepting the cup of coffee that materialized in his hands with the casual magic he was beginning to take for granted. 47 capital ships, approximately 300 support vessels, and enough firepower to sterilize this entire system. Zyarthala's voice was calm, but Marcus could see the tension in her posture. It appears that Warprime Kexthor has decided to make his point emphatically. The communication system activated with a harsh burst of static, followed by the War Prime's familiar grinding voice. Princess ZYR Thala. Human Chen. Your time for peaceful resolution has expired. You will surrender yourself to hegemony forces immediately, or we will commence bombardment of Nexus Station. You have 1 standard hour. The channel closed, leaving them in silence broken only by the ship's subtle harmonics. Marcus studied the tactical display, his engineering mind automatically calculating trajectories and weapons ranges. They're positioned to prevent any ship from leaving the station, he observed. Classic siege formation. But they're also vulnerable if something unexpected happens. Marcus, ZYR Thala said quietly, I need you to understand something. I could end this threat in moments. I could displace their entire fleet to the edge of the galaxy, or simply unmake them. But, if I do that, I become everything the galaxy fears about my people's return. And, if you don't, a lot of innocent people die. Yes. Marcus set down his coffee and walked to the chamber's edge, where the stars wheeled in patterns that defied physics. Is there a third option? I do not see one. Then, we make one. Marcus turned back to the display, studying the formation with the focused intensity that had made him one of the station's most reliable techs. ZYR Thala, how fast can this ship move? Faster than anything in that fleet by several orders of magnitude. Can you get us to Nexus Station without being detected? Easily. But, Marcus, I will not abandon you to save the station. That is not a choice I am capable of making. Marcus smiled, and there was something in the expression that made the ship's walls shimmer with reflected light. Who said anything about abandoning me? I'm thinking more along the lines of aggressive negotiations. 20 minutes later, Marcus was walking into the main docking bay of War Prime Kexthor's flagship, apparently alone and completely unarmed. The hegemony soldiers who met him were the size of small buildings, their chitinous armor decorated with battle honors that spoke of campaigns across dozens of worlds. They escorted him through corridors that were clearly designed to intimidate, past weapons displays and trophy cases filled with the surrendered banners of defeated enemies. The architecture was all sharp angles and aggressive geometry, built to remind visitors that they were inside a predator's lair. War Prime Kexthor waited in what could only be described as a throne room, though the throne itself looked more like an instrument of torture than furniture. The War Prime was even more imposing in person, his presence filling the chamber with an aura of barely controlled violence. Human Chen, he said, his voice echoing from the chamber's metallic walls. You come alone. How disappointing. I had hoped the princess would demonstrate proper concern for your welfare. Oh, she does, Marcus said cheerfully, settling into a chair that was clearly meant for interrogation rather than comfort. Which is why we're going to have this conversation instead of her just removing your fleet from existence. Kexthor's mandibles clicked with what Marcus was learning to recognize as alien amusement. Brave words from someone in your position. Tell me, human, do you understand what will happen to your people when the galaxy learns that the Eternal Empire has returned? I have some idea. But, I think you're missing the bigger picture here. Enlighten me. Marcus leaned forward, his voice taking on the calm certainty that had served him well in diplomatic situations involving malfunctioning life support systems and panicking crew members. War Prime, you're treating this like it's still the same galaxy that fought your ancestors 3 million years ago. It's not. The fundamental nature of power has not changed. Hasn't it? Tell me, how many species were spacefaring when your people drove the Eternal Empire into exile? Kexthor paused, clearly calculating. Approximately 200,000. And, how many are there now? Another pause, longer this time. 15,700,000. Right. And, in those 3 million years, how many wars of extinction have there been? I fail to see the relevance, just humor me. Kexthor's eyes narrowed, but he accessed his historical databases. 47 confirmed xenocidal campaigns. Several hundred more conflicts that resulted in the elimination of entire species, though these were typically side effects rather than primary objectives. Marcus nodded. Now, in the same period, how many species have achieved interstellar travel through cooperation with other species rather than independent development? This time the pause was much longer. Approximately 12 million. 12 million species that exist as spacefaring civilizations because someone else helped them get there. Warprime, you're looking at a galaxy that has fundamentally changed. The old model of conquest and domination is being replaced by something new. Cooperation is weakness, is it? How's that working out for you right now? Kexthor reared back as if slapped. Explain. Marcus gestured toward the chamber's viewports, where the mixed fleet hung in space like a metal constellation. Look at your allies. Hegemony ships next to Altarian vessels. Drelian escorts working alongside Vorthan cruisers. 5 years ago, half those species were shooting at each other. Now they're working together because they all share a common concern. Fear of the Eternal Empire's return. Fear of going back to the old ways. Warprime, you've spent so much time preparing to fight gods that you've forgotten to notice the galaxy isn't interested in having gods anymore. People want partners, allies, friends. They want to build things together instead of tearing them down alone. Marcus stood, walking to the viewport where Nexus Station glittered like a jewel against the darkness. That station out there isn't just a trading post. It's a symbol. 15,000 different species living and working together, sharing knowledge and resources, solving problems through cooperation instead of conquest. And, you know what the amazing part is? What? It works. Crime is almost non-existent because everyone has a stake in maintaining order. Conflicts are resolved through arbitration because everyone benefits from peaceful trade. Innovation happens faster than ever before because knowledge is shared freely instead of hoarded. Kexthor's 4 eyes fixed on Marcus with laser intensity. And, where do humans fit in this grand vision? We don't rule it, if that's what you're asking. We're just one voice among thousands. But, we've gotten pretty good at helping other voices find harmony. You speak as if your species possesses some unique quality. Marcus laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the predatory chamber. Warprime, humans are absolutely nothing special. We're not the smartest, strongest, fastest, or most advanced species in the galaxy. We can't read minds, manipulate matter, or transcend physical existence. Then, why does the Princess of the Eternal Empire choose you? Because, Marcus said, turning back to face the alien warlord, we're very good at choosing each other. Humans figured out a long time ago that survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about making friends with everyone else and helping them be strong too. Kexthor was silent for a long moment, processing this information. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of confusion that was almost endearing. You are suggesting that the Eternal Empire's return could be beneficial? I'm suggesting that Princess Zyarthala isn't the same kind of being who left this galaxy 3 million years ago. She's learned. She's grown. And, she's chosen to return not as a conqueror, but as someone looking for connection. With you. With me, yes. But, through me, potentially with everyone else. Marcus moved closer to the viewport, where the multi-species fleet hung in perfect formation. Warprime, what if instead of fighting to prevent the old empire's return, we worked together to help the new empire find its place? You speak of impossibilities. Do I? A week ago, you would have said it was impossible for hegemony ships to work alongside Altarian vessels. You would have said it was impossible for humans to negotiate with cosmic princesses. You would have said it was impossible for someone like me to walk onto your flagship and have this conversation. Kexthor's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. What exactly are you proposing? Marcus smiled, and in that expression was all the patient optimism that had convinced Zyarthala to give love a chance. I'm proposing we do what humans do best, Warprime. I'm proposing we make friends. Outside the flagship's windows, space shimmered with an impossible aurora as Zyarthala's ship materialized between the fleet and Nexus Station. She had kept her word, staying hidden until Marcus gave the signal. But, her presence changed everything, turning the standoff into an opportunity. The communication system crackled to life with her voice, speaking directly to every ship in the fleet. Warriors of the galaxy, she said, and her words carried harmonics that spoke directly to the soul. I am Princess Zyarthala of the Eternal Empire. I have returned not to reclaim old dominion, but to learn what this galaxy has become in my people's absence. Will you teach me? The fleet hung in space, weapons powered but unfired, as 47 different species considered a question none of them had expected to hear. In the throne room of the flagship, War Prime Kexthor looked at the human who had somehow turned a declaration of war into an invitation to friendship. Your people, he said slowly, are either very wise or very insane. Marcus grinned. ¿Por qué no los dos? And, somewhere in the space between threat and promise, the galaxy took its first tentative step towards something that had never existed before, a future where gods and mortals learned to build dreams together. 6 months after the day that would later be known as the Friendship Fleet Incident, Marcus Chin stood in the observation lounge of the newly established Harmony Station, watching construction crews from 47 different species work together to build something that had never existed before, a permanent diplomatic facility designed specifically for bridging the gap between transcendent beings and mortal civilizations. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd gone from fixing hyperdrives to accidentally becoming the galaxy's first xenodiplomacy specialist. But, as career changes went, it beat unemployment. The Kytherian delegation has arrived, Zyarthala said, materializing beside him in the way she'd learned he found endearing rather than startling. Over the past 6 months, she'd gotten remarkably good at small gestures that accommodated human psychology without sacrificing her essential nature. How are they handling the whole transcendent beings or people too concept? Marcus asked, accepting the coffee that appeared in his hands. Zyarthala had become obsessed with perfecting the brewing process, which had led to some interesting conversations about the relationship between molecular chemistry and emotional satisfaction. Better than expected. Their philosopher-engineers are fascinated by the mathematical implications of consciousness-based reality manipulation. They've proposed 17 different theoretical frameworks for cooperative existence. Marcus nodded, watching a Drelian construction crew work alongside what appeared to be a living nebula with delusions of architecture. The nebula was one of Zyarthala's cousins, a being named Velnath who had emerged from dimensional exile specifically to learn about small-scale engineering from mortal species. And the hegemony? War Prime Kexthor has become surprisingly enthusiastic about the project. I believe the phrase he used was strategic friendship building. Marcus laughed. Kexthor had turned out to be a remarkably pragmatic being once you got past the intimidating exterior and casual references to orbital bombardment. He'd thrown the hegemony's considerable resources behind the Harmony project after concluding that alliance with transcendent beings was preferable to the alternative of having them as enemies. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Marcus recognized the voice immediately, Director Sarah Kim of the Terran Colonial Administration, calling from Earth. Marcus, I hope you're sitting down. The Galactic Commerce Union just ratified the Harmony Accords. Unanimous approval across all member species. You and Princess Zyarthala are being invited to address the full assembly next week. Marcus looked at Zyarthala, who was studying the construction progress with an expression of what he'd learned to recognize as cosmic contentment. We'll be there, Director. And, Sarah? Thanks for believing in this when everyone else thought we were crazy. Marcus, you convinced a cosmic princess to learn how to date and accidentally prevented a galactic war. I think crazy might be selling you short. The channel closed, leaving them in comfortable silence. Marcus watched a human engineering team explain structural stress calculations to a being made of crystallized music, while nearby, a Vorthan trader shared lunch with something that looked like animated geometry. Marcus, Zyarthala said quietly, I need to tell you something. He turned to face her, noting the subtle shift in her energy patterns that usually meant she was wrestling with something important. What's up? When I first chose you, I believed I was seeking a consort, a romantic partner in the traditional sense. But, I think I was wrong about what I truly needed. Marcus felt his stomach drop slightly. Oh. I see. No, you misunderstand. She moved closer, and, when she took his hand, he felt the familiar warmth of controlled stellar fire. I was not wrong about choosing you. I was wrong about why. I'm not following. Zyarthala gestured toward the construction site, where dozens of species were working together to build something unprecedented. I thought I was looking for love, Marcus. But what I found was something more fundamental. I found someone who could teach me how to be a person instead of a force of nature. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. You were always a person, ZY Arthala. You just needed practice at the small-scale stuff. The small-scale stuff, as you call it, has proven to be remarkably complex. Friendship, cooperation, compromise, patience, these concepts are more challenging than reshaping reality at the quantum level. Yeah, but also more rewarding. Indeed. She was quiet for a moment, watching the organized chaos of construction. The Empire has decided to establish a permanent embassy here. I have been chosen to serve as the first ambassador to mortal civilizations. Marcus grinned. Congratulations. You'll be great at it. I will require an advisor. Someone experienced in cross-species relations, diplomatic protocol, and the practical applications of friendship-based problem-solving. I know just the guy. Bit of a troublemaker, though. Has a tendency to solve problems by being unreasonably reasonable with people who are trying to kill him. Perfect qualifications. ZY Arthala's expression grew serious. Marcus, I need you to understand that this is not a romantic relationship in the traditional sense. What we have developed is something new, something that transcends the categories your species typically uses. Marcus considered this. Over the past 6 months, their relationship had indeed evolved into something unique. They were partners, certainly, and there was deep affection between them. But it was built on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than traditional romantic attraction. So what do we call it? He asked. I believe the term you would use is best friends who happen to be reshaping galactic civilization together. That works for me. The observation lounge's doors slid open to admit Warprime Kexthor, who had traded his intimidating battle armor for what Marcus had learned was the hegemony equivalent of business casual. The effect was only slightly less terrifying than his warrior appearance. Princess, Marcus, he said in greeting. I have news from the Outer Rim. 3 more Eternal Empire entities have requested permission to visit Harmony Station. Including. He paused dramatically, the Architect of Sorrows. ZY Arthala's energy signature spiked momentarily. Vorthak is coming here? Are you certain? Confirmed through multiple intelligence sources. Apparently, your cousin is curious about something called therapeutic engineering after reviewing our project reports. Marcus looked between them. Should I be worried about someone called the Architect of Sorrows? Vorthak's specialty is emotional infrastructure, ZY Arthala explained. He designs experiences that help beings process grief, loss, and trauma on a cosmic scale. He is responsible for the healing nebulae of Andromeda and the comfort fields of the Magellan Cluster. So he's like a cosmic therapist? More like a cosmic grief counselor who works on a galactic scale, Kexthor said. His presence could be intensely therapeutic for species dealing with historical trauma. Marcus nodded slowly. We'll need to set up proper support systems. And probably warn the medical staff. Already in progress, Kexthor replied. My tactical analysts have concluded that the benefits of cosmic scale emotional healing outweigh the risks of having a transcendent entity focused on feelings present on the station. Your tactical analysts evaluated emotional healing? Marcus asked. Everything is tactics when you think about it properly. The communication system chimed again, this time with a voice Marcus didn't recognize. The speaker identified herself as Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earthship Endeavor, currently 3 days out from Harmony Station. Harmony Station Control, this is Captain Vasquez requesting permission to dock. We're carrying a diplomatic envoy from Earth, along with, well, this is unusual, a delegation of humans requesting asylum from what they're calling normal life. Apparently, word of Mr. Chen's situation has gotten around, and there are quite a few humans who think working with cosmic entities sounds more interesting than their current jobs. Marcus burst out laughing. How many? 12,000 volunteers, sir. Engineers, artists, philosophers, teachers, even a few comedians. They're calling themselves the Extraordinary Circumstances Brigade. ZY Arthala looked amused. Your species continues to surprise me. Marcus, Captain Vasquez continued, there's also a message from your parents. They want to know if you're eating enough and whether your alien princess friend has honorable intentions. Marcus rubbed his forehead. Tell him yes, I'm eating fine, and that my alien princess friend is actually my diplomatic partner and best friend who happens to be capable of restructuring reality when she's bored. Copy that, sir. They also want to know when you're coming home for dinner. Soon as I figure out how to explain all this to them. The channel closed, and Marcus found himself looking out at a construction site where the impossible had become routine, where beings of unimaginable power worked alongside mortal engineers to build something that had never existed, a future based on cooperation rather than conquest. You know, he said to Zyarthala 6 months ago, my biggest problem was a malfunctioning plasma converter. And, now? Now I'm worried about cosmic grief counselors and explaining to my mother that I accidentally became a galactic diplomat. Zyarthala's laugh was like stellar wine through crystalline formations. Would you change anything? Marcus considered this, watching a human construction worker high-five a being made of concentrated aurora. Not a chance. Even knowing that we will spend the rest of our existence mediating between transcendent entities and mortal civilizations? Especially knowing that. Outside the observation lounge, the galaxy continued its ancient dance, but now it danced to a rhythm that had never existed before, the rhythm of friendship across impossible barriers, of cooperation between gods and mortals, of love that transcended every category the universe had ever known. And, at the center of it all, a cosmic princess and a human mechanic continued to prove that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simply choosing to care about each other, one small gesture at a time. In the distance, the Endeavor's lights grew brighter against the stellar backdrop, carrying 12,000 humans who had decided that ordinary life was overrated. Marcus made a mental note to have the hospitality suites ready. After all, when transcendent beings and mortal species were learning to be friends, someone had to handle the logistics. It was, he reflected, exactly the kind of impossible job he was perfect for.